Welcome to Future of Data podcast. In this episode, we'll talk to Sean Naismith around what is decision management system and all about it. So stay tuned. So, welcome you all to the episode of the Future of Data podcast. Today we have with us Sean Naismith with Enova. He's head of analytics at Enova. So, welcome Sean to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Vishal. My name is Sean Naismith, head of analytics services for Enova Decisions. We're the 11th and newest brand of Enova International, who's an international lender from the near prime, subprime, and small business spaces in multiple countries around the world.
Beautiful. So let's talk about your journey. What's your background and why you decide to be in this amazing field, and love to know your background and where you're coming from.
Absolutely. So I've spent many years in both the financial services space and also the performance digital marketing space. So my world has always been around consumer-obsessed applications, around consumer journey, and delivering that optimal consumer experience. And what you find, especially in the financial space, is as the regulatory requirements increase, it becomes harder and harder to perform analytics in a silo. There's far more context than just running a predictive model, like it might be in, for instance, digital marketing, where it might be the wild, wild west when you place a bid for a display advertisement. There's many more considerations. And because of that, when the opportunity came up around building a decision management system for other businesses using the infrastructure of Enova International, a publicly traded company, it made a lot of sense to me. So jumped on the opportunity.
Beautiful. So I think you throw a couple of keywords here. So decision management system. I think we very soon will go over what exactly is that. So why don't we discuss about Enova Decisions, what exactly it is, and what is Enova and where it's fitting in. So our audience will know where you're coming from.
Absolutely. So internally we have a service-oriented architecture. We have a very large software engineering team. It's one of the largest teams inside of Enova, and a very large analytics team. And to power our online brands, we need to have low latency systems that are agile, that can have analytics models that live in context. And that context is business rules, optimization, compliance, and legal frameworks. So to manage that and to meet the internal requirements of always be learning, quick delivery, best answer wins, we needed a robust decision management system to house and power all of those real-time decisions that need to be made across the consumer journey.
Interesting. And your clientele primarily are rest of the business units within Enova, or you sell it to external as well?
Sure. So the good news is we have internal brands that we serve as internal clients. And Enova Decisions as a brand was initiated last year, and that's where we're bringing the decision management system to other businesses. So that could be not only in the financial services vertical around underwriting, fraud prevention, identity verification, but other verticals like insurance and the InsurTech movement, higher education or education tech. It could be real estate. There's many verticals that can have the benefits of real-time decisioning and real-time analytics to power operational decisions. So it's not just internal brands, it's definitely external brands across industry verticals.
Interesting. So let's talk about decision management systems. What exactly is that, and tell us something about what it is.
Absolutely. So a decision management system is more or less an emerging category of system. So you might have analytics as a service, which is a subset really of software as a service. And we definitely fall into that category, but we go beyond just hosting predictive models for real-time activation. There's also the hosting of business rules and decision flows. So I'll give an example. Loan origination as a decision flow. It's more complex than just a single credit scorecard. It could be first a set of business rules around the application, right? Is this person 18? Are they in a country that we lend in? Things of that nature. And there's no point in pulling expensive credit reports against an application when the application itself isn't even eligible for a loan. So having a decision flow maximizes the return on investment of that process. Underwriting expenses are one of the number one expenses banks and financial institutions like ourselves look at, and it needs to be kept under control. And by having versions of decision flows and constantly testing new flows, that's how you add value. It's not just in the predictive model, it's in the entire process and the context that that model lives in. So decision management system is really around business rules, predictive models, optimization routines, also hooks into third-party data providers. So you need to be pulling data from fraud providers, ID verification providers, credit reporting agencies, marketing data providers. All that needs to be kept in context and part of that flow, and it's a critical component. And also hypothesis testing. I've discussed a little bit about testing decision flows, but to be able to turn on and off hypothesis testing frameworks to see how different flows react and perform relative to each other with statistical reporting measures.
Interesting. So typically, so what are so are these decision management systems autonomous, or does a company need to provide their own sort of workforce and data, or how to structure these? If I am, I think that's where I'm heading to. If I'm a business and I want to implement that, what do I need from my end, and what do you provide?
That's a great question. So with the businesses we work with, they're looking to supplement or completely turn over two main things. One could be the building and construction of analytic models, decision flows, and optimization routines. We consider that a light consulting approach that we take. We leverage our very large data science team that's run by Joe DeCosmo across risk, fraud, portfolio, marketing, financial analytics. And we leverage our team to build decision flows and predictive models for our clients. It's a very large component of something a company might not be able to do internally for themselves. I mean, many of your listeners might have built or are trying to build advanced analytics teams. As we know, the demand is very high for those professionals, it's expensive, and if it's a new capability that you're trying to build internally, you might not even know what to look for in the right candidate. So if you need support building models, we absolutely bring that support to the table. The second side of the equation is the activation of predictive models and decision flows. So if you look at pain points across analytics teams, one of the primary pain points is we built a model and then it sat on the shelf and collected dust. We were never able to activate it in production and realize the benefits of that model. Because a model requires more than just coefficients, right, or a structure. It needs to be on a high-speed technical platform with low latency, version control, uptime requirements, and all the technical requirements and service levels that are needed of a production level system. So that's where a decision management system comes in. A good decision management system should have low latency, high flexibility, and the ability to be integrated in a software in a service-oriented architecture. So there's a simple API call that needs to be made from the client side. We execute the rest of the decision flow and return the decision and other metadata that's needed, maybe a score, or in the lending space, a notice of adverse action, things like that to fulfill the additional requirements of that decision.
Interesting. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I think when I was looking at your profile and I was doing some research, I was reading a lot about analytics as a service, or analytics as so. What exactly is that, and how it is linked to DMS, decision management system? If you can shed some light on that, will be useful.
Absolutely. So I think of the components of a decision management system, the hosting of predictive models, and if the company also provides a consulting approach to build models, is really the focus of analytics as a service. You can even go a step further with automated, so online learning models. That just simply means that the model is updated as it interacts with its environment. So there's many synonyms for that, and the artificial intelligence has been used, reinforcement learning. There's many terms for online learning algorithms. But that's absolutely something that could be integrated into a decision management system. So to answer your question, I think analytics as a service is a subset of software as a service, but decision management systems build on analytics as a service platforms to incorporate more. And that more includes, again, the integrations into third-party data vendors, the hosting of business rules, and all those capabilities, along with audit trail automation and optimization routines. So I think there's just more services that are part of a decision management system that's separated from maybe just a pure analytics as a service provider.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So I think one thing that I was thinking about when I was sort of reading about Enova and your profile was that analytics as a competitive edge, right? So do you believe in that idea of analytics as one of the competitive edge nowadays? And I think one of the sort of the segue into that is if it is, then why do you think it's an edge, and if it's not, why it's not? So if you can shed some light.
So I think analytics has always been and always will be requirements of having a competitive edge. Now I'd like to really frame it more as what type of decision requires analytics. So you can have strategic decisions that are made at the executive level. Obviously, there's a different type of analytics that need to be produced to provide insights for better strategic decisions. Those strategic decisions then flow into tactical decisions. Those are executed by managers and organizations, right? From there, they flow into operational decisions. And really, a decision management system, in our opinion, is the automation and maintenance of those operational decisions. And maybe a value add and kind of closing the loop is providing feedback into strategic decisions from the output of operational decisions. So we really frame how we think about analytics in the term of a decision. What are the decisions that an organization makes on an ongoing basis that will be best served by having predictive analytics or need to be controlled through audit trails or a rigorous hypothesis testing framework? So to your point, and actually to your question, I think every business can benefit from analytics, whether it's strategic, tactical, or operational, really depends on that business. And then finding the correct system to support that decision-making process is critical when selecting a service provider, or whether to determine, do we build this in-house or do we buy it and have a service provider provide that function?
I think that's a very good point, and I think that leads me to my next question, which is actually, it's kind of a tangent from where we are, but it's relevant for the topic. So I think I have found myself in several conversation around. So whenever I pitch business as art and engineering or the science as science, right? So typically now there is, with the emergence of analytics, it's kind of a slippery slope. So analytics is more science trying to be art, right? So now with more these sophisticated capabilities of relying on predictive models and relying on analytics, are you or aren't you sort of sacrificing the art of doing business by having more science in it and making it more predictable rather than that's my core competency used to be? I think, and one of the biggest worry is, what if with the next upgrade my core competency is washed out? So like what are some of your thoughts on on this area? Love to know that.
Absolutely. So I actually think that better analytics tools will be providing almost more brushes in the kit for artists, right? So if business leaders are artists, the more capabilities you have to power insights at every level of the business, the more tools you have to be creative, right? I mean, 20 years ago, I couldn't imagine injecting real-time decisioning and predictive models into some of the business processes we're looking at now, like ACH transactions or into collections, right? And I would say it further complements the art of business, because now you're able to say, I have a new team with new capabilities and they can move faster than ever before. And that gives me actually more creative freedom and more creative power to compete against, right? I think business leaders that understand the capabilities of their analytics teams and understand how to translate that into a competitive edge are going to be the most creative. And we can see that right now with the analytics competitors in the world, right? The Googles, the Apples, the Netflix of the world, the Enova Internationals of the world that are competing on analytics, driving market share. It's a big part of our story and how we do business. And, one of our core values here at Enova International is the best answer wins, right? And that's not just answers from humans, right? That's now answers from machines. And I think that's important to driving our company culture and other companies as far as the art. So to your question, I think it only complements and provides more creative options for business leaders. And one other point on that, I think the emergence of the Chief Analytics Officer as a role in the C-suite is evidence of that.
No, I think you have a very strong point, and I think very well said. I couldn't agree more on that. So now let's segue into a business that is not well versed in the science of doing analytics. How is that world is getting changed because of decision management system platforms? Because I think I don't know what you're talking about. It's too gibberish for me, and I know that all of my golf buddies are talking about the same thing. How can I sound somewhat relevant in that conversation? So what are some of your takes on how it is impacting, how the science of it is impacting the business side?
It's a great question. And I think if businesses focus on turning their decisions into assets and what they focus on is a great way to start. So every business leader understands the decisions they make in their business. And it's not foreign to any business leader to know that how decisions get made and the quality of those decisions drive profitability and competitive edge. So I wouldn't think of it as, how do we integrate a support vector machine into our decision-making process? That's useless. I think what is important is, what are the key decisions that are repeatable that we can potentially inject intelligence into? And I think that's a question any business leader can ask themselves and identify with their teams. Once those decisions are identified, you could then look to service providers, right, if you don't want to build it yourself, to help us gather and understand how to make this decision better. You could look for, put out an RFP to say, we're looking to improve this decision. What are the tools and techniques that are possible, and how do we prove that? And I think that's something any business can do. And really it revolves around, now that we know the decision, what data is available at the time of decision, right? What's the first party data? What's the potential second and third party data that we could pull into this? And then how do we model it? And do we provide the results to humans, or do we provide it to a machine, right? And then start to integrate it from there. But I think framing it as a decision is the first place you should start.
Interesting thought. So now let's talk about I'm a small business, right? So it's again I'm still struggling with this idea of tech and all that, right? So you raised some of the interesting point of how to get started. When is the ideal time for me to start thinking about investing in something like decision management systems, or am I already in it? So what are some of your thoughts?
I think if you have an operational decision that recurs on an ongoing basis, that could be standardized, I think once you identify a decision that fits that criteria, you now have a candidate for a decision management system, and that's when you could be ready. Some businesses simply don't have those type of decisions, right? And in that case, you might not need a decision management system. But for the most part, most small, medium, large businesses have some sort of repeated decision that can be modeled, that can benefit from rigor and testing and improvements in the injection of predictive analytics to make it smarter.
Interesting. I think you raised a very good point that repeatable decisions, as soon as you hit that, you need some systems to sort of optimize that. I think, thank you for sharing that. And now let's talk about a bunch of analytics as a platform or analytics as a service use cases that you are seeing, or sort of bunch of portfolio of companies that are using these software or capabilities, and what are some of the findings or decisions you are helping these companies with?
Absolutely. So let's maybe first start with telecommunications. One of the greatest challenges telecommunications companies face is having subscribers stay on their service. And subscribers can leave. We all own a cell phone these days. We all know when we're frustrated with our service and we reach our breaking point and we feel like, okay, that's it, I can't take it anymore, I'm switching providers. If you can model that based on consumer behavior, not just about payments, but around usage, right? What does data usage look like over time? How does that compare to text? How does that compare to voice? Also, how does it compare to how they historically used their device? And also, how does it compare to the rest of my population? You could also look at link analysis. So what other folks on the network, who are they calling the most? What does that network look like? Has there been any churners or attrition in their local network? You can also pull in potentially third-party data on that consumer. And the goal is to model out not only what's the probability on an ongoing basis of a consumer leaving the service over X amount of days or weeks, but also what are the potential interventions we can take to keep that person on our service. And also, given that we give that intervention, what's the probability we keep them, and how many months, and what's the projected revenue? So if you have all those figures estimated with intelligence, you can then rank order which customers you reach out to first, who's most priority to your business, to have the optimal intervention at the right time to keep them on your service and improve overall customer satisfaction, and also improve your key performance indicators around consumer churn and profitability. So it's a win-win for both consumers and the business. The consumers have a better customer experiences, the business has a greater profitability and growth, and that's a key decision that's repeatable, right? Because think about it, every day, every week, every month, you're scoring your subscriber base, the probability of leaving, what can we do to keep them and make them happy? That's a repeatable decision. It's operational. It fits exactly the criteria of what's optimal on a decision management system.
Interesting. So let's talk about decision life cycle with decision management system. So if you can sort of walk us through from the very initial moment and when the decision is delivered, like what is the decision life cycle looks like?
Sure. So a decision process life cycle, the first starts with modeling the decision. So that really starts with, what is the final outcome? What do we need to decide? Is it an approve or deny on a consumer for credit, right? Is it a intervene with a customer in telecommunications because they might be leaving, or don't? Those are the basic questions you need to ask yourself at the beginning of modeling. From there, you need to ask yourself, what are the sub-decisions? What other decisions do we need to make to arrive at that final decision? In loan origination, it could be, is this person of age? It could be that the application data I spoke about earlier. It could be, were we able to verify their identity? Are they who they say they are? From there, is there any fraudulent intent of harm? And then finally, it could be, are they worthy of credit? Should we extend them credit according to our criteria? So those sub-decisions are really the next phase in decomposing the macro decision into sub-decisions. From there, you need to identify what are the input data, the data sources that are required for each sub-decision. Also, what are the knowledge sources and business rules that are needed at each sub-decision level? And once you have that framework, you could then start to put together a decision flow. So the decision flow looks like, what is the first thing we can do that is the lowest cost, that is going to answer a sub-decision that gives us a breaker, right, a threshold on whether or not this overall decision is going to be a yes or a no, for example, right? And the example earlier was, is this person of age to receive a loan? You don't need to do anything else in that decision flow if that applicant doesn't meet that criteria. And then from there, you systematically go through and understand each step in that decision process. Now, when it comes to the predictive models, obviously some of these decisions, sub-decisions, are powered by predictive models. A credit scorecard, right, is based on a predictive model. Or fraud. Fraud identification could be both supervised, semi-supervised, and unsupervised learning models that are also powered by hard business rules. So that could be a collection of models with certain thresholds. So as you can see, it gets very complex. There's many teams that need to be involved, from analytics teams to compliance and legal to business owners, to make sure that every stakeholder that has a say in a sub-decision or is responsible for a knowledge source or is responsible for a piece of input data is part of that process. Once that decision flow is fleshed out, it could then be coded into the decision management system and from there tested. Usually there's a user acceptance testing process and a production output validation process. Does the decision match up with what we expected during the data study phase? When we created these models in R, Python, SAS, whatever your modeling platform is, do these two things match up? And then once you have verification and confidence, you could then go to a production setting and monitor the system. From there, you can see the results. You can make sure that the system has low latency, has high uptime, and all the technical performance measures are hit. You could also monitor the statistical performance. What is the output of these models? Do the distributions line up with expectations? Are the approval rates appropriate and within expectations? Also monitoring the input variables. All those input values, are those up to expectations? And then once you are confident, you can start building new hypotheses around how can we improve this decision flow, right? What if we add in additional logic into that fraud sub-decision? Or what if we test out this new data vendor for credit reporting variables to include in this underwriting model? You can build those and then start running champion challenger tests to see how that decision flow performs relative to the other decision flows. Of course, you always need to keep in mind the statistical confidence power of the test, how many samples you need to collect, running a controlled experiment. All of that applies. And then once you have a challenger model that beats the champion, you have a new decision flow. So it was a long answer, but it's a very complicated question, right? Building a decision flow is complex, especially when you have multiple submodels.
No, I think, and thank you so much for walking us through it, because I think this definitely gives our user a perspective of what a DMS or decision through this DMS looks like. So I think that will be really helpful. And I think last week I was in one of the conversations with one of the retail guys from Midwest, and their concern was, hey, we never realized that our users or buyers also hang around on Snapchat, and now my platforms are not equipped, and so I think that brings me to this point of how does our decision management system handle a scenario where the customer landscape itself is changing. So if now customers are hanging in new different platforms and I have no visibility on that as a business, now I need to pull in extra additional resources or data sources. So would these DMS work with other third-party vendors too that I have to deal with, or like how does that interaction work when the customer expectation or the positioning changes?
That's a great question. So, and to your question earlier, are humans going to get replaced, right, as more of these decisions? And I think you just gave a great example of a time when a decision management system allows people to be more creative. You freed them up from the constant operational decision making, so now they can explore the space and say, wow, there's a new platform, Snapchat, that my users are on. How do I integrate this into my existing framework? And it's a great point, right? With a robust decision management system, for instance, we're always looking at new data vendors. We have a very robust IT risk, compliance, and legal framework that either integrator partners or activation partners need to pass certain thresholds to be on our platform. So whether it's social data to pull in on social listening, or whether it is an activation platform like a bidding tool or a loan origination system, there's certain thresholds you need to meet from a compliance compliance perspective. Whether it's identified by our team through our constant analysis of the marketplace, or whether it's identified on the client side, either way it's a win. And we're excited that we have a way to enhance the decision flow. From there, we figure out how do we test this, what data is available. For instance, Snapchat, what data are they making available? How can we activate predictive models on the Snapchat platform? And how we view that world is integration partners, which provide us data, and activation partners. Where can our clients activate the models in existing frameworks? And whether it's a new integrator or activation partner, we're happy to explore those relationships and add it to our robust list of partners that we have in the marketplace.
Interesting. And I think when you were saying this, I think one thing that came to my mind was there had been too much talks about wall in this country recently. So that brings us to a point of globalization, right? So for some of the companies who are transnational, also who are in multiple locations, how would they approach deploying these decision management systems? Because they have to take care of the trade and technology. They have both of these interfaces they have to interact with. So do you have some thoughts around how would a company which is transnational would go about deploying these capabilities?
Absolutely. So there's multiple ways to do that. Some countries have certain regulations, right? One of our clients is in China. We actually have an instance of our entire decision management system hosted in China that's able for them to access. Now, I don't know if any of your listeners have built software or hosted software in China. There's a lot of hurdles you have to go through. So for us, it's a competitive advantage where we have a very large and talented legal and compliance team that's able to work our way through and have a robust offering overseas. So what I would say to your international clients is make sure you know the regulations and your legal team is aware of what we're trying to solve for. Make sure you work with a company that has done it before. And that's something Enova International has done. We're the largest subprime lender in England, right? We have businesses in Australia, Canada, Brazil, China. So we're international as well, and we understand those hurdles. Another thing to take into consideration is the ability to have the decision management, an instance deployed either on-premise or in a private cloud. So if the public cloud is just not an option, finding a decision management system that is able to deploy in a variety of places is also an advantage. So, ideally you're able to report against at an enterprise level. You have a visibility across your entire businesses with how decisions are being made, and that usually requires a platform that is cross borders and has experience doing that.
Interesting. So now I think let's talk about the agility of these systems, or how adaptable these systems are to sort of these changing times. So if I got to decide which system to go for, like, are there any types of digital management systems that exist today out there, or what are some of the initial sort of thoughts that I should go through before trying and talking to vendor like Enova and to work on getting a DMS installed or capability installed in my business?
Absolutely. What I would say is first understand, is this really just for one decision, or is this more of an infrastructure play, right? It's very possible that you have localized analytics in your business, and you might have one team or even sub-team that has is more advanced with their analytics capabilities, has identified a certain decision that can be automated, and really just focuses with that one decision in mind. And that might not be the best path for the rest of the business. So catching that early on and saying, okay, if this does work and we do see value from onboarding this decision management system, what are the next steps? Are we going to want to onboard other decisions made in other departments? And if so, can this system handle it? Right? Do you really want to be having 5 to 7, 10 different decision management systems for different departments? It could get very complex, and then you start to lose the agility. And also, one of the key benefits of a robust decision management platform, which is one point of integration, having that holistic enterprise-wide framework in mind when looking at data providers is important. So I'd say if you do have a candidate decision, then start thinking to the next step. Where would we potentially deploy this next? And is it bigger than just this one decision? And once you have that in mind, start looking for platforms that fulfill future requirements, not just current today requirements.
Interesting. So, beautiful point by the way. I think, and when you were saying this, I think one thing came to my mind about there has been a lot of anxiety around analysis paralysis, right? So most of the business worry about how much do I have to think, and am I overthinking about this problem or not? So how would a platform or system like these help or contribute in any capacity to help me say, okay, this is the optimal decision making that I've been served with? So any thoughts on that?
Sure. I would first say that technical prowess is no longer a necessity to compete on analytics. It used to be you need big data engineers, you need a very advanced software team and analytics team to be able to compete on analytics. That's no longer the case because of companies like our decision management systems in general. You're able to outsource those core competencies and areas of expertise. To analysis paralysis, you want to pick a system that will provide best-in-class analytics and decision flow support, absolutely. But if you have time frames and you say, well, as long as we have something that out of the gate makes us money and makes us more efficient, let's get that in market and then start to test and learn. I think that's the most important. So when we work with clients, we have a very specific decision in mind that we need to model and execute against. And coming back to my point earlier, if you know what that decision is and you're focused on how do we make that decision better, it makes analysis paralysis less of a problem. Because then you start to realize, okay, it's just this one decision for now. We have a future roadmap, but we have ways to make it more robust in the future, but we have a better way as of this moment. So let's get that into production. We have an agile system. It's a simple API call. We manage the rest. And then from there, we could test and learn through the hypothesis testing framework. And just that test and learn mentality is part of a culture as well.
No, I think that's a very good point. Having a decision flow, I think definitely, and thank you for sharing that. Would certainly help with the paralysis situation. So, very good point. And now let's talk about, somehow you can't have analytics talk without talking about AI nowadays. So how would decision support systems or decision management systems work with AI? Like, do they have so are they available as third party solutions that could sort of talk to these platforms, or are the providers themselves recruiting these capabilities and giving it to vendors? So what's the case with the Innova's case, if you can shed some light on that?
Absolutely. So artificial intelligence is more, it's kind of a broad term. You see some reports that talk about even a logistic regression as being artificial intelligence in a scorecard. Other just think of neural networks and any online, maybe machine learning paradigm that learns as interactions come into full cognitive computing, right? So I guess it really depends where you draw the line in the sand with artificial intelligence as a term. But how I see it is artificial intelligence can power parts of a decision flow, and it's a component in that decision flow. So it could either be hosted on that decision platform, or it could have API calls out to artificial intelligence platforms. There's some platforms that specialize in certain AI applications, and if the results of that artificial intelligence can be incorporated as a sub-decision, that's a great candidate for an integration partner into our platform that could then be put into a decision flow for the ultimate answer and monitoring. So to your question, there's multiple ways to go about it, but I think the integration route is vital, because different AI companies have different expertise, and whether it's built in-house or if it's accessed through there, as long as it's properly structured in that decision flow, monitored and tested against, you're going to be able to see gains.
Interesting. And that's a very good point. And I think one thing that I was thinking about is some of the challenges and opportunities that exist in the current decision management systems. So what are your thoughts around what are some of the opportunities or challenges that the current ecosystem has, just to give a clarity on what am I up against? Like, what are some of the things that you sort of feel maybe someday, whatever, we could have fixed this or support. So what are some of those, if you can share?
Well, the first I'd say is it's both an opportunity and something that's a weakness right now, and that's just education of the space. It's moving very fast, it's robust, and there's a lot of components to a decision management system, and a lot of synonyms for that matter. So education of clients is critical right now. And I've had a call where we were discussing building a new predictive model. And as we started to explain everything that a decision management system does, the prospect said, I didn't even know this existed. This is what we were looking to build in-house, right? So even the concept and the name decision management system, right, isn't forefront in the minds of prospects and potentially consumers that are building these systems. So I think education is right now critical. What are the capabilities of these systems? How do they integrate with existing architectures? And how do we maximize the value of a decision management system so we don't have to build it ourselves? And I think that's a critical component.
Interesting. And I think one thing definitely that I liked about, I think when you initially stated about the relevance of decision management system is, if it's a repeatable decision, then yes, let's go for it. So let's talk about the non-repeatable stuff, right? So you figured something out, you acted on it, and then let me know you figured something out and you acted on it. How far are we from that sort of flavor of decision support system, in which I don't really have to really wake up from my sleep when some decision is taken? Like, they figured something out, they reacted on it, and all I care is my bottom line is not impacted. So how far are we from that journey?
That's a great question. I think as you get further into tactical and strategic decisions, and I think that's kind of where that question is, right? You're no longer just looking for a decision management system to execute against operational decisions. You're now asking them to help managers, right, in tactical decision making, and that, I would say, is quite a ways out. And I think that's really coming to the art of business, where you can have platforms that help inform, and you use the term decision support system. Those are different than decision management systems. I think decision support systems are really machine to human, right, versus a decision management system, which is ideally or machine to machine. And those machine to human systems that provide intelligence and insights for strategic and tactical decision making exist, but the full automation, right, the full cognitive computing capabilities to be able to pull that off, I think in most industries is pretty far away. So to your listeners that were worried about job security, I don't know if those are going to be, taken with those type of systems at any time soon.
Interesting. And I think thank you so much for some of the interesting and sharing your thoughts with us. And we are at the tail end of our interview. So I think one of the parting question I ask almost with everyone is, what do you think is the role of decision management system in future of data? So what do you think, and what's your perspective? If I can have that, will be really helpful.
Absolutely. I think the majority of companies aren't analytics competitors. They aren't. They have analytics aspirations. So as the market continues to adopt advanced analytics, more and more companies are going to be using decision management systems versus trying to build it in-house. So the future of what I see is an increased adoption rate. And as far as capabilities, I think you hit on some of the core ones. How do you integrate cognitive or artificial intelligence into that decision-making process and be able to scale that? How do you have that into larger context? And also, how do you bring your key stakeholders together to say, yes, a decision management system is the right path? So the future, I think, is educating of prospects and stakeholders, and an increase in adoption because of that education as more and more companies realize they need to compete on analytics.
Beautiful. I think I you couldn't have said any better than that. So definitely, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sitting with us and sharing candidly what do you think decision management systems are and how Enova is helping shape that landscape. I wish you all luck and success, and definitely do come again and let us know how the journey takes you and what are some of the new things you're adding to your portfolio that we can share with our subscriber. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Vishal, and thank you all your listeners for taking the time for this podcast.
Beautiful.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a